The first time I heard the phrase restricted erosion zone, I laughed because it sounded like a joke written by someone who had never stood on the rim of the Grand Canyon and felt small. The second time I heard it, it was spoken by a man with a federal badge who did not smile. He slid a manila folder across the table toward me like it carried infection. No logo, no letterhead. Just a stamped classification marking that was intentionally vague, the way the government likes its secrets. I only saw it for a second before he covered it again with his palm. "You are being contracted for consultation," he said. "We need your interpretation on site. You will not take photographs. You will not bring personal recording devices. You will sign what you are told to sign." I should have said no. I had said no to other things. In my 20s, I'd been young enough to think curiosity was a virtue in itself. That phase ended after an oil company hired me to assess a sinkhole in West Texas, and we found a collapsed brine cavern full of old equipment and a worker's boot still standing upright in dried salt. No body, just the boot, like the ground had swallowed the man clean. I learned then that the earth keeps what it wants. But a week later, I was on a small government aircraft cutting across Arizona at dawn, watching the canyon carve itself open beneath us like an old wound. The sun touched the ridges and turned them the color of dried blood. Shadows sat in the folds of rock with the patience of animals. Across the aisle, Captain Rios of the Army Corps of Engineers pretended to read a report. His eyes kept lifting to me, as if he expected me to bolt through the fuselage. "Tell me what happened," I said. "We had a collapse," he answered, without looking up. "In a zone that is not on any public map." "People fall into the canyon all the time," I said. "Tourists, hikers, climbers. That does not get me flown in under secrecy." He finally met my gaze. His pupils were too steady. "It was not a tourist zone. It was a facility. Something under the rock shifted. A shaft opened." "A mine?" "No." That was all he gave me, which was enough to keep my mind chewing. I'd spent 15 years reading the language of stone through instruments, interpreting what the ground said when it thought nobody was listening. Seismic reflection, gravimetry, resistivity. You learn patterns. You learn how emptiness looks. Empty space in rock has a signature. So does metal. So does something that should not exist. We landed at a small airstrip with no civilian markings. 2 black SUVs waited with engines running. The air smelled of hot dust and sun-baked brush. It was winter, but Arizona winter still carries heat, like a held breath. They drove me for hours through scrubland and gated roads until the canyon appeared again, deeper and darker here, away from the tourist overlooks. No gift shops, no railings, no bright signs warning people not to die for a photo. Just fences. A perimeter line ran along the rim with armed guards every 50 yards. Beyond them, tents and floodlights and portable generators made a temporary city out of nothing. A crane sat like a bent-neck bird over a fresh scar in the rock. Rios opened my door and motioned me out. "Stay close." I walked toward the tents and felt the canyon wind rise, cold and dry, carrying a faint mineral tang that reminded me of struck flint. The ground under my boots vibrated with generator hum. A woman in a white hard hat approached, hand extended. "Dr. Mason Rourke?" "Yes." "Dr. Annika Patel," she said, "geotechnical lead." Her handshake was firm, but her skin felt chilled, as if she had been holding something cold for too long. Behind her, I saw a group of people gathered around a table with laminated maps and equipment cases. 8 of them, not counting guards. A mixed team, which told me this was not just military. 2 men in black tactical gear, faces closed off like shutters. 3 scientists in field jackets, including Patel. A medic, a communications tech, and 1 older man with a silver beard and a calm expression that looked practiced. That one wore no hard hat. He wore a badge on a lanyard that he kept tucked under his jacket, as if even the plastic could be seen from orbit. Patel guided me to the table. We read your papers on deep cast collapse modeling, your work with void mapping. You think this is a natural void, I said. Patel's eyes flicked toward the scar in the rock. I think something is under there that doesn't match the geology. The silver-bearded man stepped forward. You are here to confirm what our instruments are telling us. Nothing more. His voice had the flat certainty of someone used to being obeyed. Who are you? I asked. You may call me Adler, he said. You may not call me anything else. Rios cleared his throat as if to interrupt, but Adler held up a hand. Patel pointed toward the scar. The collapse happened 48 hours ago. We were drilling a stability bore for the facility. The bit dropped through rock like it wasn't there. A familiar chill crawled across my ribs. Depth? Patel hesitated. We expected bedrock continuity at 200 feet. The bit fell at 110. That's not... I began, then stopped. You'd have known there was a cavern. We should have, Patel said quietly. Our surveys show nothing. No void, no fracture zone, no cast. It is as if the hole appeared. Adler's voice cut in. Not appeared. Exposed. Rios pointed toward the crane. We lowered a camera. Patel tapped a tablet on the table. The screen showed shaky video, a circular shaft lined with rock that abruptly transitioned into something smooth and dark, like glass. The camera light slid across it, and the surface did not reflect the way any mineral should. No grain, no fracture, just a uniform sheen. Then the video jerked, as if something had pulled the line. What happened? I asked. Patel's throat bobbed. We lost the camera. Snapped cable? No, she said. The cable came back up. She swiped to a still frame. The camera had been aimed at a seam, a faint line in the dark material, like a door fitted so precisely it made the idea of hinges feel primitive. On the seam, a pattern, not scratches, not tool marks. Intent. My mouth went dry. That is not geology. Adler leaned closer. And now you understand why you are here. Rios gestured toward a cluster of gear cases. We are going down. Patel's eyes found mine. We need someone who can read the ground. Someone who can tell us if this thing is stable, if it will shift, if it will collapse on us. I stared at the still frame again, at the seam in the dark wall. A door buried in rock older than trees, older than bones. How many people have been down there? I asked. Rios's jaw tightened. 2. Patel's face went rigid. 1 came back. The wind pushed against the tents, making the canvas strain. Somewhere a metal pole clinked against another. In any other setting, it would have been an ordinary sound. Here, it felt like a warning. Where's the survivor? I asked. Adler answered. Sedated, uncooperative. What did he say? I pressed. Adler's gaze held mine. He said the shaft was not empty. Rios lifted a case and opened it, revealing harnesses, rope systems, and compact weapons sealed in foam. That surprised me less than it should have. If you go into the Earth expecting a fight, you have already decided something about what the Earth is. Patel noticed my look. Those aren't for you, she said. Then who are they for? I asked. Nobody answered. Which was answer enough. They fitted me with a harness and helmet and clipped a light to my chest. My hands moved automatically, checking buckles and knots like I'd done in caves a dozen times before. My mind stayed fixed on the tablet image. A door. When they led us to the shaft, floodlights made the rock face gleam. The scar was wider than I expected, a raw opening where stone had broken away. Below it, a perfectly circular hole descended into darkness like a drilled well, except no drill on Earth made walls that smooth. Rios clipped his line first. Order stays tight. No wandering. No heroics. The tactical men went ahead of him. One of them, a broad-shouldered sergeant with a shaved head, glanced back at me. If you see anything moving, he said. "You tell me. You do not stare at it." "That's an odd instruction," I said. His expression did not change. "It's the only one that matters." He went over the edge and disappeared downward. Patel followed, then the medic, then the communications tech. Adler insisted on going before me, which told me he didn't trust anyone behind him. When my turn came, I stepped to the edge and looked down. The shaft swallowed the light. I felt a pressure in my ears, like standing too close to a subwoofer at a concert, except there was no music, just a faint, steady sensation that made my teeth ache. I started my descent. At 50 feet, the rock was normal limestone and sandstone, layered and familiar. At 80, it changed. The walls lost their texture, turning slick and dark. The headlamp beam slid over it and failed to find any imperfections. At 110 feet, I reached the seam. Up close, it was worse. The dark material was not metal, not stone. It had the visual depth of obsidian and the softness of shadow. My glove brushed it, and I felt a vibration through the fabric, like touching a living animal that held itself very still. The tactical sergeant was crouched at the seam, studying the pattern. "What is it?" Patel asked. He shook his head. "Not marks, not writing." Adler came down beside him, eyes fixed on the seam like he recognized it. He raised a hand and placed his bare palm against the dark surface. "Do not," I started, but stopped as the seam responded. The line widened, silently, as if the material relaxed. The door opened, and the air that spilled out was not cave air. It was warmer, faintly metallic, carrying a clean, sterile scent that had no business existing this deep in the earth, like a hospital corridor sealed for centuries. The tactical sergeant lifted his weapon and aimed into the opening. Our headlamps cut forward and revealed a corridor that curved away into darkness, its walls the same black sheen, its floor marked with thin, pale lines like veins under skin. Then something moved at the edge of the light. Fast, low, wrong. The sergeant's weapon rose a fraction, and the thing lunged. I did not hear a roar or a screech. There was no dramatic sound, no movie theater cue. There was only the sudden, brutal shift of bodies and light as the sergeant was yanked forward into the corridor so hard his tether snapped tight. He screamed once, a short human sound that ended in a wet choke. His boots scraped the threshold. Then he was pulled out of view. Patel shouted his name. Rios surged forward. Adler said, very calmly, "Do not cross the threshold until you understand." But it was too late for understanding. Something in the darkness tugged again, and the severed end of the sergeant's tether slid back toward us, not cut, cleanly dissolved, as if the rope had been erased. The corridor waited, still open, still breathing warm air. And I understood with perfect clarity that whatever lived inside that buried structure did not consider us explorers. It considered us a problem. Rios did what soldiers always do when fear shows itself. He tried to turn it into a problem with a solution. "Haul him back," he barked, gripping the tether with both hands. The medic reached for the line too, instinct over sense, and Patel shouted, "Wait!" But the word arrived too late to matter. Rios braced his boots against the shaft wall and pulled. For half a second, nothing happened. Then the tether went slack with the suddenness of a snapped neck. Rios staggered backward, almost overbalancing into the hole behind us. He caught himself, breathing hard. His helmet light swung wildly, painting the corridor in strobing arcs. The severed end of the rope dangled in front of us. Not frayed, not cut. It ended in a smooth rounded taper like melted wax that had cooled mid-drip. The communications tech, a thin man named Ochoa, leaned closer. "Acid." "No residue," Patel said, voice tight. "No burn. Nothing." Adler was still at the threshold, motionless, eyes fixed into the corridor as if watching an animal that might pounce again. Rios swallowed and forced his voice steady. "Sergeant Hale, respond." Only the corridor answered, exhaling that warm, sterile air. It was Patel who made the first sound that mattered. Not a scream, not a sob. A quiet, furious exhale that said her brain was trying to build a rational wall around what we'd just seen. That was not a cave-in, she whispered. That was an interaction. Rios turned to Adler. We're leaving. Adler's gaze flicked to him. No. Rios's jaw tightened, a man caught between orders and the primitive need to survive. We lost a man in 10 seconds. This is not a drill site anymore. Adler tilted his head as if listening to something deeper than our voices. We already crossed the point of withdrawal when we came down. You think the surface is safety. If this structure wanted us gone, it would not have waited for the door. That landed in my stomach like a stone. Because he was right. Whatever that thing was, it could have killed us at the rim, or at 50 feet, or when Patel's first camera went down. It had waited until we were close enough to understand helplessness. Rios's hand hovered near his sidearm. What are we dealing with? Adler's voice lowered. Custodians. Patel blinked. That's a term, not an explanation. It's enough, Adler said. I found my own voice again, surprising myself with how calm it sounded. If you knew something could do that, why bring a team this small? Adler finally looked at me fully. His eyes were pale, washed out blue, the color of old ice. Because we only needed a few of you. The corridor's thin floor lines pulsed faintly beneath our lights, like the glow of deep sea creatures reacting to movement. Rios raised a hand and motioned for us to form up. Weapons up, lights fixed, no one crosses alone. Ochoa, keep comms open with surface. Ochoa swallowed and nodded, hand shaking as he adjusted the radio pack on his harness. Surface, this is Echo Team. We have a situation. Static hissed, then a clipped voice answered. Echo Team, confirm status. Ochoa hesitated, glancing at Rios. Rios spoke into the mic. One casualty. We are proceeding with caution. A pause. Then, proceed. That was the moment I understood something important. Whoever was above us did not react to death with surprise, not even with concern. This was expected. Rios stepped to the threshold, weapon raised. His light cut into the corridor. The space beyond curved gently left, the walls seamless, the air shimmering faintly with some kind of heat differential. No blood. No sign of Sergeant Hale. Just clean floor. Rios took a cautious step in, boots landing on black surface that should have been slick but wasn't. The material had grip, like engineered rubber without texture. Patel followed, then the medic. Adler moved with slow confidence, as if he'd walked this kind of place before. Ochoa and I came last, the open door behind us feeling like the last mouth of the real world. When we were all inside, the seam behind us began to narrow. Rios spun. No! The door shut with the same silent precision it had opened. We stood for a beat in the corridor, staring at where the exit had been. My headlamp beam found no outline now, no seam, no sign there had ever been a door. Patel's breath went shallow. It's sealed. Ochoa's radio crackled. Surface! Surface, do you copy? Only static replied. Rios turned to Adler, fury flaring. You said... I said, Adler cut in, that retreat was an illusion. The corridor stretched forward, curving out of sight. The pale vein lines beneath our feet brightened slightly, as if our presence fed them. I crouched and put my gloved fingers to the floor. It was warm, not geothermal warm, warm like a body. Dr. Rourke, Patel said softly, tell me what you think. I wanted to lie. I wanted to say it was some experimental composite, some exotic alloy, some hidden bunker built by humans with secret funding and advanced materials. But my hands knew the truth. My instincts, trained on natural formations and man-made structures alike, were screaming that this was neither. It's not carved, I said. It's not assembled in segments. There are no seams, no welds. It's grown, or printed, or formed in place. Rios's weapon remained raised. And the thing that took hail? I pictured the blur at the edge of the light, low to the ground, too fast. The way it didn't announce itself, the way it pulled like hail weighed nothing. A maintenance organism, Adler said. Or a security response. Patel's voice trembled. Security for what? Adler didn't answer. He started walking. Rios took a breath, fighting the urge to put Adler on the ground. Then he signaled. Forward. Move. We advanced. The corridor's curve opened into a wider chamber, circular, tall enough that our lights couldn't find the ceiling. The walls had the same black sheen, but here the vein lines formed patterns, concentric rings spreading outward like ripples in a frozen pond. At the center stood a structure like a pillar, but not stone. It was made of the same material, branching slightly at the top, like an antenna or a tree that had learned geometry, and around it were objects scattered on the floor. I took a step closer and felt my stomach fold in. Pieces of equipment, a helmet light, a torn strap, and something else. A human hand, still inside a glove, severed cleanly at the wrist. The medic made a sound that was more breath than voice. Patel covered her mouth with her fist. Rios walked to the glove, staring at it like he could will it back into a man. Hail. Ochoa gagged and turned away. I forced myself to look beyond the glove. There were other things. A boot sole, sliced as if by a wire. A patch of fabric with the army insignia. A smear on the black floor that looked like blood but dried too quickly. Darkening and then fading as if absorbed. Why leave this? Patel whispered. Adler circled the central pillar slowly, studying it. To teach. Rios snapped his gaze to him. Teach what? Adler placed a palm on the pillar. The vein lines under our feet brightened sharply, and the air shifted. I felt pressure in my sinuses, behind my eyes, as if the room had become a sealed container, and someone had just altered the internal atmosphere. The pillar's surface rippled. A line of pale symbols emerged, crawling across it like bioluminescent algae. Ochoa stared. It's writing. Patel stepped closer, eyes wide. It's not any script I know. It wasn't letters. It was geometry turned into language, angles and curves that felt like they were designed to be understood by something that thought, in different dimensions, and yet my brain insisted on interpreting it, the way it tries to see faces in clouds. Rios lifted his weapon again. Adler, what did you just do? Adler's expression remained calm, but sweat had beaded at his hairline. I requested a response. A response from what? Patel demanded. Adler looked at her. From the system. The pillar brightened, and the symbols shifted. The vein lines under our feet began to pulse in sequence, like a heartbeat trying to sync with ours. Then the chamber's far wall opened, not with a door seam, but with a section of wall that simply became not wall. A passage formed, perfectly circular, leading down at a gentle slope. Warm air rolled up from it, heavier than before, carrying that sterile smell mixed now with something faintly sweet and wrong, like preserved meat. Rios took a step back. No. Adler's voice softened, almost reverent. Yes. Patel grabbed my sleeve, nails pressing, through fabric. Mason, this is responding to him. How does he know what to do? I didn't answer because I was watching the passage. Something moved in the darkness beyond it. Not a blur this time. A shape. It stayed just outside our lights, patient, like a predator that had learned we were afraid of what we couldn't see. Then it slid forward enough that the edge of its body caught the beam. It was low, jointed. Too many limbs folded beneath it in a compact crouch. Its surface was the same black sheen as the walls, but interrupted by pale lines that ran along its body like nerves. Its head, if it was a head, was smooth and featureless, except for a slit that opened and closed rhythmically, like breathing. No eyes, no mouth, and yet it faced us with the certainty of attention. Rios fired. The muzzle flash lit the chamber white. The shot cracked in the enclosed space, sharp enough to hurt. The bullet hit the creature's surface and vanished into it like a pebble, thrown into tar. The creature did not recoil. It surged forward. The medic screamed, stepping back instinctively, and the creature snapped one limb outward. It didn't stab or slash. It touched. The medic's suit, his harness, the plastic fittings, everything it contacted turned grey and crumbled into powder, as if the material had aged 1,000 years in a second. The medic dropped, not because he was hit, but because his harness failed and his body fell hard on the black floor. He scrambled, trying to get up. The creature's second touch landed on his chest. His scream cut off. His body did not explode. It did something worse. It dried, collapsed inward, skin tightening, organs shrinking, eyes sinking into sockets as if time accelerated through him. In less than 2 seconds, the medic was a husk, a human shape reduced to brittle mass, still wearing the outline of a uniform that had already turned to dust. Patel made a strangled sound and stumbled backward. Ochoa, bolted, panic overriding training, sprinting around the central pillar toward the chamber wall as if he could find an exit by willpower. The creature turned toward him with smooth, deliberate motion, and another shape emerged from the darkness of the passage. Then another, 3 of them now, gliding in coordinated silence. Adler's voice cut through the terror. "Do not run!" Ochoa ran anyway. One of the creatures shot forward with a speed that made my vision stutter. It reached him before he took 3 steps. Its limb brushed the radio pack on his back. The pack disintegrated, and with it the straps holding it. Ochoa spun from the sudden release, lost balance, and fell. The creature leaned over him, slit opening and closing. Ochoa looked up at it, eyes wide, mouth working soundlessly. Then the creature touched his throat. His skin grey faded. His mouth fell open. His eyes clouded. His body collapsed into itself like a drained bag. In the space of a breath, 2 men were dead. Rios emptied 3 more shots into the nearest creature. Each bullet sank into black surface and disappeared. No blood, no reaction. Patel grabbed my arm hard. "Mason!" I wasn't moving. I couldn't. My mind was stuck on the medic's face as it aged into nothing. Rios shouted, "Fall back!" "To where?" Patel screamed. The chamber was sealed. The door was gone. The corridor behind us did not exist anymore. The only opening was the new passage that led deeper. The passage the creatures guarded. The system was herding us. Adler stepped toward the central pillar again, palms raised like a man approaching an aggressive dog. "We are not hostile," he said, voice steady. "We are authorized." The creatures paused, not fully, not retreating, but their motion changed, like a knife held still before it cuts. Rios snarled. "Authorized by who? By what?" Adler didn't look at him. "By the ones who built it." Patel's grip tightened until it hurt. "Mason, he's insane." But the creatures weren't killing Adler. They had killed the medic. They had killed Ochoa. They had taken Hale. They could kill all of us in seconds. Yet Adler stood there untouched. The central pillar pulsed brighter, and the symbols on its surface rearranged again. Then, a new sound entered the chamber. Not a roar, not a scream. A low, vibrating hum that resonated in my teeth and bones, the way heavy machinery does when it spins up. The vein lines under our feet lit in a flowing pattern toward the passage, like runway lights guiding a plane. The creatures shifted aside, just enough. A corridor opened for us. Rios stared, weapons shaking now, not from fear, but from rage. "They want us to go down." Adler nodded once. "Yes. And if we don't?" Adler's eyes flicked to the brittle husk that had been the medic. "Then we become debris." I swallowed, tasting copper. Patel's eyes were wet. She looked like she wanted to scream until her throat tore. Rios took a slow breath, then motioned forward with his weapon. "Move," he said. We stepped past the dead. We stepped toward the passage. And behind us, the chamber's lights dimmed, as if the system had already decided we were no longer part of the surface world. The slope was gentle, but everything about it felt designed to make us forget we were descending. The passage was wide enough for 2 people abreast, and the walls curved inwards subtly, just enough that my sense of straight lines began to slip. My headlamp beam couldn't find corners. There weren't any. Just continuous black surface with pale vein lines flowing along it like faint circuitry. Behind us, the chamber's glow dwindled until it became nothing. I tried not to look back, but I did anyway. There was no doorway now, no seam, no opening, only wall. Patel's breathing sounded loud in my ears. Rios moved ahead with the remaining tactical operator, a lean man named Sato, whose eyes kept flicking to every shadow. Adler walked between them as if he was the one being protected, not the one who needed watching. I followed, forcing my legs to keep pace. We had lost 3 people in minutes: Hale, the medic, Ochoa, and the system had responded like a machine cleaning a spill. No hesitation, no emotion, just removal. The hum persisted, low enough that it wasn't exactly sound. It lived in my teeth, in the base of my skull. Every now and then, it changed pitch slightly, and with it, my stomach tightened, as if gravity had shifted a fraction. I tested my radio, mostly out of habit. Nothing but static. Patel leaned close. "Mason," she whispered, barely moving her lips. "We're walking into a trap." "We're already inside it," I whispered back. Ahead, the passage widened into another chamber, this one longer than it was tall, like a hallway that had decided to become a room. The floor lines formed a pattern of branching paths, converging at a raised platform. On the platform sat something that made my pace falter. A table. Not a human table, but a flat surface, supported by a single thick column. Its edges were rounded, its material the same black sheen. Above it hung a shape like a ring, suspended with no visible supports, rotating, slowly, as if the air itself held it. And on the table was a slab of something pale, bone white. Rios lifted his weapon. "Hold." Sato raised his light. The beam hit the slab, and a shimmer rippled across it like heat haze. It wasn't bone, it was a screen. The surface brightened, revealing layered patterns, contours and grids and shifting symbols that made my eyes want to focus and slide away at the same time. Patel took an involuntary step forward. "That's mapping." Adler nodded, voice soft. "Interface." Rios looked at him sharply. "You keep saying words like you're reading from a manual." Adler did not deny it. He approached the table and hovered his hands over the slab without touching, as if he respected it the way you respect a loaded gun. The slab responded anyway. Symbols reorganized, lines brightened. A 3-dimensional image rose from the surface, like mist sculpted into shape. It took my brain a second to understand what I was seeing. It was the Grand Canyon. Not an artist's rendering, not a satellite image. A living volumetric model, layered with depth, strata, faults, water channels, voids. The canyon wasn't just a surface cut. It was a cross-section of Earth's memory, displayed like anatomy. Patel inhaled sharply. "That resolution, that's impossible." The model rotated slowly on its own. I saw the Colorado River as a thin blue thread. I saw limestone layers like stacked pages. I saw ancient stone that shouldn't have any features at this scale. And then I saw something else. Beneath the canyon, deeper than any known cave system, was a shape like a buried spine. Long, segmented, perfectly symmetrical. The craft. Except it wasn't one craft. It was a network. My throat tightened. "It's connected." Rios stared. "How far does it go?" Adler's voice was almost reverent. "Farther than you want it to." The model zoomed outward. The canyon shrank into a region. The region into a continent, the continent into Earth. And beneath the crust, faint lines spread like roots from the Grand Canyon site. A lattice, a planetary pattern. Patel whispered, "No." I realized my hands were trembling inside my gloves. "This isn't a crash." Adler finally looked at me. "Correct." Rios turned on him. "Then what is it?" Adler's lips pressed together. For a moment, he looked like he might actually share something real. Then the practiced calm returned. "It's a system," he said. "An old one." Patel pointed at the lattice. "That's in the mantle. That's impossible. Nothing built by humans survives there." Adler's eyes flicked to her. "Who said it was built by humans?" Sato shifted, voice tight. "Captain, we shouldn't be here." Rios didn't answer. His gaze was locked on the model, on the way those lines wrap the planet like a net. Then the display changed again. The canyon model faded. A new image rose. This time, not Earth, but something like a biological diagram. Layers of organic shapes, branching tubes, pulsing nodes. It looked disturbingly like a nervous system. The veins in the floor brightened in sync, as if the room was answering its own screen. Patel stepped closer, eyes wide. "That's not geology. That's anatomy." Adler nodded once. "It treats the planet as a body." Rios's voice dropped. "And we're what? Bacteria?" Adler didn't answer, but the silence was confirmation. The hum deepened. And then the screen displayed something that made the hair on my arm stand up beneath my sleeves. A symbol cluster formed, then simplified, then rearranged, like the system was searching for a form we could comprehend. Finally, it produced an image, a human outline, then another, then a group of them clustered together. 8 figures, our team. The figures flashed, 3 dimmed instantly. Hale, the medic, Ochoa. Their outlines collapsed into dust like pixels that fell away. The remaining 5 figures pulsed. A path appeared beneath them, highlighted in pale light, leading deeper. Patel swallowed. "It's tracking us." Rios's knuckles whitened on his weapon. "It's directing us." Adler looked at the screen, and for the first time, his calm cracked just slightly. "It's evaluating." Sato's voice rose. "Evaluating for what?" The screen answered before Adler could. The human outlines shifted. They changed proportions, the limbs elongating slightly, the torsos narrowing. The heads smoothed into featureless shapes, not human anymore. Then those altered figures were overlaid with the earlier diagram, the planetary nervous system. The altered figures moved along the path like cells traveling through a body. Patel backed away. "It wants to change us." I felt cold spread through my chest. "Or it wants to categorize us." Adler's eyes met mine. "Yes." Rios took a step toward Adler, weapon still raised but forgotten. "You knew. You brought us anyway." Adler's jaw tightened. "You volunteered for a classified operation. You signed waivers. You accepted hazard compensation. That doesn't cover this." Rios snapped. "This is not a hazard. This is a..." A sudden flicker in the room cut him off. The ceiling, if there was a ceiling, brightened, revealing faint geometry overhead. Not lights in fixtures, light embedded in the material itself. The table's ring spun faster. The air pressure shifted again and my ears popped. Patel grabbed my arm. "Mason, do you feel that?" "Yes," I whispered. "Like altitude." The hum rose in pitch. The screen changed, showing the corridor behind us as a simple line. Then a branching set of lines ahead, like options. One branch pulsed red. The system's language seemed to clarify. Avoid that path. Then the red branch flashed, and a symbol appeared over it. Sharp angles. Aggressive. Warning. Sato swallowed. "What's down that way?" Adler didn't answer. He looked almost reluctant. Rios noticed. "Adler." Adler's voice came out quieter. "The maintenance core." Patel frowned. That sounds important. It is, Adler said. And it's hostile. Rios stared. Everything here is hostile. Adler shook his head. No, not everything. The custodians respond to intrusion. The core responds to existence. I felt my stomach sink. Meaning? Adler placed a hand on the table's edge. Meaning, if it recognizes you as incompatible, it does not remove you. He paused. It corrects you. Before anyone could ask what that meant, the screen flickered again, and the human outlines returned. This time, they were labeled, not in English, in geometry. But the system simplified again, offering a crude translation through iconography. One of the outlines, Adler's, was marked with a symbol that repeated, stable. The others were marked with a different symbol, unstable, new, contaminant. Patel's face drained. We're the problem. Rios's voice tightened. Then why is Adler stable? Adler's eyes flicked away. Because I've been here before. The words hung in the air like a gunshot. Patel stared. What? Sato took a half step back, weapon rising toward Adler. Captain? Rios held up a hand to stop him, eyes locked on Adler. How long? Adler hesitated, and for the first time I saw something human in him. Fear of saying the wrong truth. Then he said it. Since before you were recruited, Adler admitted. Since before this site was officially restricted. Patel's voice broke. You opened the door. Adler nodded once. Yes. Rios's face went hard. Then why are we here now? Adler looked at the human outlines on the screen. 3 dead, 5 alive. And then he spoke like a man reading a verdict. Because it's waking up, he said. The hum deepened again, as if the system acknowledged his words. The table's ring rotated faster still, and the floor veins lit in a flowing wave toward the forward branches. The corridor ahead brightened faintly, as if inviting us onward. Or luring us. Patel leaned close to me, voice shaking. Mason, if he's been here before, then he knows how to survive. I kept my eyes on Adler. Or he knows what we're being used for. Rios stepped forward until he was inches from Adler. Tell me the truth. Right now. Adler's pale eyes looked tired for the first time. The truth is this. The system has always been here. It adjusts. It maintains. It corrects. It has rules. He lifted a hand and pointed at the screen, at the 5 remaining outlines. And the first rule, he said softly, is that anything it cannot classify becomes waste. The lights overhead dimmed again, leaving the screen as the brightest thing in the room. The red branch stopped flashing. The system chose for us. The forward path lit, and somewhere deeper, beyond the edge of our headlamps, something answered with a faint shift in the air, like movement in a space too large to be underground. Rios stared into the lit corridor. Move, he said, voice hoarse. And we did, because the alternative was to stand still until the system decided to fix the contamination by turning us into dust. The corridor ahead narrowed just enough to make it feel like a throat. Not a metaphorical throat, a literal one. The walls curved closer, the floor veins brightening in slow pulses that matched the low hum in my skull. My headlamp beam didn't bounce off surfaces the way light should. It slid, absorbed, and returned only a dull sheen, as if the material was deciding how much of our presence it wanted to acknowledge. Rios and Sato led. Patel stayed close to me, her hand never far from my sleeve, like she was afraid we'd be separated by something invisible. Adler walked behind the 2 soldiers, and I watched him the way you watch a man holding a detonator. Calm, careful, waiting for the moment he admits what he's really doing. We passed 3 branching junctions. Each time, the floor lines guided us without doubt, brightening under the correct path and dimming under the others. It wasn't navigation in the human sense. It was herding. After the 3rd junction, the air changed. The sterile smell thickened until it was almost sweet, like antiseptic sprayed over rot. My throat went dry. I swallowed and tasted metal. Patel whispered, "We're close." "How can you tell?" I whispered back. She nodded slightly toward the walls. The pale lines embedded in the black material were denser here, more braided, like a nerve bundle converging near a spine. The hum rose another notch, not louder, higher, more intimate. Then the corridor opened abruptly into an enormous cavity that made my mind stutter. It wasn't carved rock. It wasn't even a chamber in the normal sense. It was architecture that had decided to imitate scale. The space stretched out like a cathedral built by something that didn't worship gods, only functions. The floor dropped away in tiers, stepping down toward a central pit. Above the pit, structures rose like ribs. Between those ribs ran arcs of pale light, and inside those arcs were suspended objects that rotated slowly, each one a different shape. Spheres, elongated spindles, geometric blocks that seemed to change when I stared directly at them. The pit itself glowed faintly from below, and as we stepped onto the first tier, the floor beneath my boots vibrated. A tremor. Rios froze, weapon up. "Movement!" Sato's voice was tight. "I don't like this." Adler stopped at the edge of the tier, looking down into the pit like a man staring at a grave he helped dig. Patel whispered, "Mason, that's not a room." I followed her gaze. The pit wasn't empty space. It was filled with a slow, swirling haze, like liquid in motion, except it didn't reflect light like liquid. It drank the light and returned a faint glow from within, as if something inside it was lit by its own chemistry. And embedded along the pit's rim were openings, not doors. Ports, dozens of them. Some were sealed with smooth black plates. Others were open, their edges wet-looking, like tissue. I couldn't stop myself from saying it. "It's a processing hub." Rios glanced at me. "Processing what?" Before I could answer, one of the open ports flexed. Something slid out. Not a custodian like the ones we'd seen. This was larger, waist-high, with a body that unfolded in segments. Pale lines ran along it like veins under translucent skin. Except the skin was black sheen, and the lines glowed brighter the longer it stayed exposed. It paused on the edge of the pit, as if tasting the air. Then it turned toward us. Rios raised his weapon. Adler's voice came out sharp for the first time. "Do not shoot." Rios didn't lower the gun. "It killed 2 of my team." "That wasn't this," Adler said. "This is the Corps' hand," Sato muttered. "That's comforting." The creature moved again, not rushing. Approaching with slow certainty. Its limbs, 4 primary, 2 secondary, touched the floor with a light tap that sent faint ripples through the black surface. It wasn't walking so much as syncing with the room. Patel's fingers dug into my arm. "Mason, look." The floor veins beneath the creature lit in a moving pattern that matched its steps, like the room was guiding it precisely where to place its weight. The creature stopped 10 feet away. A slit opened along its front. Not a mouth, a seam. From within the seam, something extended, thin, needle-like, gleaming pale. A probe. It hovered in the air, pointing toward Rios first. Rios swore and stepped back. "No!" The probe shifted toward Patel, then toward me. My pulse hammered. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but there was nowhere to run that wasn't deeper into the system. Adler lifted a hand and spoke toward the creature in a low voice. Not English, not any language. It sounded like measured breath and clipped syllables, like someone trying to mimic a pattern they'd heard, rather than words they understood. The creature paused. The probe retracted slightly, as if reconsidering. Rios's eyes narrowed. "What did you say?" Adler didn't look at him. "I asked for a delay." "A delay?" Patel hissed. "From a thing that turns people into dust?" Adler's jaw tightened. This is not the same mechanism. The creature's probe extended again, slower now, and angled towards Sato. Sato lifted his weapon. Back off. The probe didn't back off. It touched Sato's sleeve, not his skin. Just the fabric at his shoulder. The fabric didn't disintegrate. Instead, it changed. The black tactical cloth lightened to grey, then to a pale, chalky white, as if the dye had been pulled out. The material stiffened, becoming brittle. Sato flinched hard, yanking away. What the hell? The probe withdrew. The creature tilted like an animal studying reaction. Then the floor beneath Sato lit sharply in a ring around his boots. A containment marker. Sato looked down. Captain? Rios stepped forward, anger and fear warring in him. Leave him alone! He fired. One shot. The bullet hit the creature dead center and disappeared again like it had struck a surface that wasn't solid. But this time, there was a reaction. The creature's pale lines flared brighter. The hum dropped abruptly, like a machine shifting into a deeper gear. And the entire chamber responded. The ribs above us lit in sequence. The suspended objects rotated faster. The pit's glow intensified. Patel screamed, "Rios!" Rios's face went rigid as he realized he'd just done something irreversible. Sato backed away instinctively, but the ring around his boots brightened and climbed up his legs like light traveling through water. Adler swore under his breath, a rare crack of emotion. You provoked the core. Rios turned on him. You didn't tell me shooting would... I told you not to, Adler snapped. Sato's knees buckled. Not because he chose to kneel, but because his legs stopped behaving like legs. The skin at his ankles began to grey, not like ash, but like stone. It spread upward in a creeping wave, turning flesh into something mineral and dry. Sato's voice broke. Mason! I moved toward him without thinking, but Patel yanked me back. Don't touch him! Sato's hands clawed at his own thighs as if he could peel the change off. The grey wave climbed to his knees. His veins darkened, then vanished. His breathing came in sharp, panicked pulls. Rios stepped forward, reaching out. Sato! The creature's probe flicked toward Rios and stopped inches from his chest, a threat without contact. Rios froze. Sato screamed again, and then his scream changed. It dropped in pitch, turning into a strangled sound as his throat stiffened. The grey wave reached his torso, his ribs visible for a moment under tightening skin before the skin hardened into a brittle shell. His eyes widened, and for a second I saw him clearly. An intelligent man trapped in a process that did not care about his consent. Then his eyes filmed over. He didn't collapse like Ochoa had. He remained upright for a heartbeat, locked in place, transformed into a statue of a soldier mid-panic. Then the statue cracked. Fine fractures spidered across his chest and face. And with a soft, final shatter, Sato broke apart into chalky fragments that fell to the floor in a neat pile. No blood, no gore, just the shape of a man reduced to pale debris. Patel made a sobbing sound that she tried to swallow. Rios stared at the pile, mouth open, gun hanging at his side like a useless toy. Sato. The creature's lines dimmed slightly, satisfied. The ring of light around the debris faded, and the pit's glow pulsed once, as if the system had marked the correction complete. Adler's voice came out low and deadly. Now it knows you won't comply. Rios looked up, eyes wild. You mean it's going to kill us? Adler shook his head once. Not kill. He glanced at the pit, at the open ports. Correct, he repeated. It will attempt to make you compatible, or it will reduce you into something it can recycle. Patel's voice was a whisper. Recycle us. The chamber shifted again. A deep mechanical resonance rolled through the ribs overhead. The suspended object slowed, then repositioned, aligning above the pit in a precise grid. One of the ports at the pit's edge opened wider, its rim flexing wetly, revealing darkness beyond. Something moved inside that darkness, bigger than the custodians, heavier. The air grew warmer, and then the smell changed again, the sterile sweetness giving way to something that reminded me of old copper and damp stone. Adler backed up a step, the first time I'd seen him retreat from anything. It's bringing the engine online. Rios swallowed hard. Engine. Adler's eyes met mine, and in them I saw the truth he'd been avoiding since the rim of the canyon. "This is not a craft," he said softly. "This is a workshop." Patel's grip on my arm tightened until it hurt. "Mason, if this is a workshop, then what are we to it?" I stared at Sato's remains, at the neatness of the fragments, at the absence of blood, like the system refused the messiness of biology. "We're raw material," I said. The open port gaped wider, and something inside it inhaled. The chamber lights dimmed, forcing our headlamps to do the work again. Our beams cut into the darkness, catching glimpses of movement within the port, segments shifting, pale lines flaring. Rios raised his weapon again, hands shaking. "Adler, how do we get out?" Adler didn't answer immediately. He looked at the table ring memory in his mind, the map under the map, the lattice beneath Earth, the way the system had chosen our path. Then he said the worst thing he could have said. "We don't go out," Adler admitted. "Not the way we came." Patel's voice cracked. "Then how?" Adler pointed toward a narrow walkway that spiraled down along the chamber wall, leading toward a smaller passage on a lower tier. The floor veins there pulsed in a calmer rhythm, almost inviting compared to the pit. "That route bypasses the core," he said. "It leads to the archive." Rios stared. "The archive?" Adler nodded. "Where it stores what it learns, where it keeps the history of corrections, where it decides what happens next." The port behind us flexed again, and something larger shifted within. Adler's eyes hardened. "Move now," he said, "or the workshop will start working." We ran, not screaming, not flailing, running with the desperate precision of people who know panic wastes time. We started down the spiral walkway, boots hammering on warm black surface. Behind us, the chamber's hum rose, deeper now, and the air vibrated as if a massive machine had begun to spin in the pit. And somewhere in the darkness of the open port, something began to climb out. Slow, heavy, inevitable. The spiral walkway clung to the chamber wall like a scar. We ran hard at first, boots slipping slightly on the warm surface, then slowed as the slope steepened and our lungs burned. The hum from the pit followed us, deeper now, layered with a slow mechanical rhythm that felt less like sound and more like pressure. Each step carried a faint vibration through my bones, as if the structure beneath us was waking fully for the first time in a long while. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel the thing behind us in the way the air thickened, in the way the floor lines pulsed faster when we moved too slowly. Whatever was climbing out of that port didn't rush. It didn't need to. It knew where we were going. Adler led without hesitation, taking turns and ramps as if he'd memorized the layout. That alone told me more than any confession could. This wasn't exploration for him. It was return. Patel was breathing hard now, her earlier composure cracked by fear and loss. She stumbled once, caught herself on the wall, and hissed in pain when her palm touched the surface. "It's hot," she gasped. "Too hot." I glanced at her hand. The glove's outer layer had lightened slightly, fibers stiffening. "Don't touch the walls," I said. "Not bare, not long." Rios was behind us, weapon up, face drawn and hollow. He didn't speak. I didn't think he trusted his voice not to break. The spiral ended at a narrow platform carved into the wall. From there, a single corridor extended outward. Lower ceiling, tighter curve, less light. The floor veins here pulsed in a calmer, steadier rhythm, almost soothing compared to the chaos we'd left behind. Adler slowed, lifting a hand. "This is it." Patel looked past him into the corridor. "The archive." Yes, Adler said. Where it remembers. Rios's voice came out hoarse. And what happens if it remembers us? Adler met his gaze. Then we become part of the record. That didn't help. We moved into the corridor, and the change was immediate. The air cooled, not comfortable cool, but dry and still, like a sealed library where the climate never fluctuated. The hum faded to a background presence, replaced by a faint clicking sound that reminded me of old hard drives spinning up. The corridor widened gradually, opening into a vast chamber that stole what little breath I had left. Rows, endless rows. Tall, slender columns rose from floor to ceiling, arranged in concentric arcs. Each column was translucent, pale light glowing faintly from within. Suspended inside them were shapes. At first, my brain refused to process what my eyes were seeing. I thought they were statues, artifacts. Then I realized they were bodies, not human, not entirely. Some were vaguely humanoid, elongated limbs, smooth heads, proportions wrong in subtle ways. Others were completely alien. Too many joints, asymmetrical forms, shapes that made my stomach turn because my brain couldn't categorize them. And then there were the familiar ones, human figures, dozens of them, hundreds, encased upright in the columns like insects in amber. Patel made a small, broken sound. Oh my God! I stepped closer to one column, drawn by a shape that looked disturbingly familiar. The pale light illuminated a face I recognized from photographs in textbooks. A Neanderthal, broad nose, heavy brow, powerful build, frozen mid-breath, eyes closed, expression almost peaceful. Those are hominins, Patel whispered. Different species. I moved along the row, heart pounding. Another column held something smaller, slighter, an Australopithecine, proportions unmistakable. Further on, a Homo erectus. Then something that looked human but not quite, features subtly off in ways that suggested evolutionary paths not taken. Rios stared, horror etched into his face. It's been collecting us. Adler shook his head. Not collecting, cataloguing. Patel turned on him, anger cutting through fear. You brought us into a graveyard. Adler's voice dropped. No, a library. The clicking sound grew louder and one of the columns brightened. Symbols crawled up its surface, the same geometric language we'd seen before, now scrolling in vertical lines like data being accessed. The column's contents shifted slightly, the figure inside twitching. Patel gasped. They're alive. Not alive, Adler corrected. Preserved. Rios raised his weapon again, hand trembling. For how long? Adler didn't answer. The floor veins brightened, flowing outward from the corridor entrance in branching paths that wrapped around the columns. The archive was aware of us. I felt it in the pressure behind my eyes, the way the clicking sound synced with my heartbeat. Patel clutched her head. Mason. It's... She staggered. I caught her elbow just in time. What is it? Her eyes were wide, unfocused. I can hear impressions, like memories that aren't mine. Adler's gaze sharpened. You're sensitive. Patel laughed weakly. That's not comforting. Rios looked between us. What does it want? As if answering, the chamber's light shifted. A section of columns dimmed, and a central dais emerged from the floor. Smooth, black, familiar material. Above it, the air shimmered, and a shape began to form. Not a creature, an image. Layered, translucent shapes overlapped until a crude approximation of a figure appeared. Tall, vaguely humanoid, its features shifting constantly as if it couldn't settle on one form. A projection. The clicking sound stopped. Silence fell so complete, it felt like pressure. Then the projection spoke, not with sound, with sensation. My head filled with images, flickers of landscapes I didn't recognize. Skies the wrong color, oceans too thick, too dark. Forests of crystalline structures instead, of trees. Cities grown, not built, and then collapse, Fire, ice, impact, extinction. I dropped to one knee, gasping. Patel cried out, clutching her skull. Rios swore, staggering but staying upright through sheer will. Adler stood perfectly still, eyes closed, as if bracing for a familiar storm. The images shifted. Planets, different worlds, each one layered with the same lattice we'd seen beneath Earth. The projection pulsed. Correction attempts, some successful, some not. Whole biospheres altered, species culled, others modified and preserved. The message was brutal in its simplicity. This system wasn't unique to Earth. It was everywhere, and it failed as often as it succeeded. Patel sobbed. It's showing us dead worlds. Failed ones, Adler said softly. Worlds that couldn't be stabilized. Rios looked up at the projection, face pale. And Earth. The image shifted again. Earth appeared, wrapped in the lattice. Highlighted. Regions pulsed. Impact events. Ice ages. Mass extinctions. Interventions. Corrections. And now, one region pulsed brighter than all the others. The Grand Canyon. The projection focused on our location, zooming in until the archive chamber itself was visible from some impossible perspective. Then 5 shapes appeared beside it. Us. 3 dimmed instantly. Hale, the medic, Ochoa. Sato's shape flickered, then collapsed into fragments. Only 4 remained. Patel screamed, "Stop!" The projection didn't react to the sound, but something in the system shifted. One of the human-filled columns nearby brightened sharply. The figure inside twitched violently. Rios spun toward it. "What's happening?" Adler's voice was tight. "It's comparing." The column's light intensified, and the human figure inside began to change. Limbs elongated, spine curved, facial features smoothed away. The transformation was slow enough to be cruel. The figure's mouth opened, in a silent scream as its bones restructured, joints sliding into new alignments that made my skin crawl. Patel collapsed fully now, retching. "It's rewriting them." "Yes," Adler said. "This is how it adapts." Rios shouted at the projection. "We're not samples." The projection turned slightly toward him, its shifting face settling briefly into something almost human. Almost. A pressure built in my chest, and a single unmistakable concept pressed into my mind. Compatibility. The system wasn't hostile in the way an animal is hostile. It wasn't angry. It wasn't malicious. It was pragmatic. If you fit, you stayed. If you didn't, you were corrected or removed. Adler finally spoke directly to it, his voice low, careful. "We request exemption." The projection paused. Symbols cascaded across its surface. The clicking resumed, faster now, like a machine running calculations. Then the projection fractured into multiple overlapping shapes, each one representing a different evolutionary outcome. Patel looked up weakly. "Mason, it's deciding what to turn us into." I felt cold clarity settle over me. "No," I said. "It's deciding if we're worth keeping at all." The projection's shapes converged again, collapsing into a single form. The pressure in my skull intensified until I thought something might burst. Then, the system made its decision. 2 of the 4 remaining outlines dimmed. Patel screamed my name as her outline flickered on the projection. I grabbed her, pulling her close. "Patel!" Her body went rigid. Her eyes rolled back, and she screamed, not out loud, but inside my head, a psychic shriek of terror and pain that dropped me to my knees. The light around her flared, and then she was gone, not disintegrated, not transformed, simply erased. 1 second she was in my arms. The next there was empty space where her body had been. No dust, no residue, nothing. Rios roared in pure fury and raised his weapon toward the projection. Before he could fire, the floor beneath him lit, and his feet locked in place like Sato's had. He struggled, muscles straining, veins standing out in his neck. "Mason, run!" Adler grabbed my arm hard, dragging me backward toward the corridor we'd entered from. Now! The archive chamber shook as if the system had grown impatient. Columns dimmed and brightened in chaotic patterns. The projection fractured, losing coherence as if something had disrupted its process. Rios screamed again as the grey wave climbed his legs. I met his eyes one last time. "I'm sorry," I whispered. He smiled, just barely. "Get out." Adler yanked me hard, and we ran. Behind us, Rios's scream cut off abruptly. The archive lights surged, then dimmed, and as we fled into the corridor, the clicking sound rose into a furious mechanical chatter, like a machine trying to decide how much contamination it could tolerate before wiping the slate clean. We didn't slow until our lungs burned and the corridor bent sharply enough to hide the archive behind us. Adler finally slammed a hand against the wall, signaling a stop. I nearly collided with him, legs trembling, vision tunneling. The corridor here was narrower, the ceiling lower, forcing us to hunch instinctively, like the space wanted us smaller. Behind us, the archive's mechanical chatter echoed faintly through the structure, distorted by distance, but unmistakably angry. I bent over, hands on my knees, sucking in air that tasted too clean, too thin. My mind kept replaying the moment Patel vanished. One instant her weight in my arms, the next nothing. No transition, no mercy. I hit the wall with my fist, the pain barely registered. "She was right there," I whispered. "It just deleted her." Adler didn't look at me. He pressed his palm flat against the black surface, eyes closed, as if listening to something I couldn't hear. "The archive is no longer neutral." I laughed, a sharp, broken sound. "Neutral! It erased her like a bad line of code." Adler opened his eyes. "That is neutrality to a system." My anger flared hot and sudden. "Then what are you?" That got his attention. He turned slowly, pale eyes locking onto mine. For the first time since we'd met, the mask slipped completely. "I am a tolerated variable," he said. "Nothing more." The hum changed, not louder, closer. I froze. "Do you hear that?" Adler nodded. "Yes." The floor veins beneath our boots brightened in a flowing wave that moved past us, away from the archive, like a warning traveling ahead of a storm. Adler's jaw tightened. "It's breached containment." My stomach dropped. "The core?" "No," he said quietly. "The custodians." As if summoned by the word, the corridor behind us darkened. Not dimmed, darkened. Our headlamp beams cut back and found the black surface swallowing light more aggressively, the pale vein lines retreating as if shutting down. Then something moved. Low, silent, too smooth. I backed away instinctively, pulse hammering. "We didn't provoke them." Adler shook his head. "You don't need to anymore. The archive flagged you as unresolved." The air thickened again, pressing against my chest. A shape slid into view at the edge of my light, then another. 3 custodians emerged from the darkness, their bodies folding and unfolding with fluid precision. They were larger than the ones we'd seen earlier, their pale lines brighter, more complex, adaptive. Adler stepped forward, hands raised. "We are proceeding to an exit vector." The custodians paused. Their slit seams opened and closed in a synchronized rhythm that made my skin crawl. For a fraction of a second, hope sparked. Then one of them tilted its body slightly, an angle that felt like a question. The floor veins beneath us lit sharply. Containment markers bloomed in a ring, around my boots. I felt the pressure lock me in place, invisible, but absolute. Adler swore under his breath and stepped backward, free. My heart slammed. "Adler!" "They're prioritizing you," he said urgently. "You're unclassified." The nearest custodian glided forward, probe extending, pale and precise. I strained against the invisible restraint, muscles screaming. "Then do something!" Adler hesitated, just a fraction, long enough for me to see the truth settle on his face. "You are more valuable alive," he said. "I am more valuable if I escape." Rage flooded me, white hot. "You bastard!" The probe touched my shoulder, not my skin, the strap of my harness. The material stiffened instantly, bleaching pale as the fibers aged and died. The pressure around my boots intensified, crawling up my legs. I screamed, not from pain, but from the certainty of what was coming. Then Adler did something unexpected. He stepped forward again. And he spoke, not to the custodians, but to the corridor itself. The same measured, breath-like cadence as before, but louder now, layered with urgency. The floor veins flickered. The custodians paused. The probe retracted slightly. Adler's face contorted with effort, sweat breaking out across his brow. "You are exceeding tolerance," he said, in that alien rhythm. "This subject is pending evaluation." The custodian's pale lines pulsed rapidly, communicating in a language of light. The restraint around my legs loosened a fraction. Adler turned his head just enough to meet my eyes. "When I say run," he said, "you run. Do not look back." My throat closed. "You're sacrificing yourself." His lips twitched in something that might have been a smile. "No, I'm restoring balance." The corridor shuddered violently. Not an earthquake, a deliberate movement. Sections of the wall ahead rippled, then peeled back like skin revealing muscle beneath. A new passage formed, jagged, imperfect, the pale vein lines there flickering erratically. An error. The custodians reacted instantly, two of them pivoting toward the new passage. Adler shouted, "Now!" The restraint vanished. I tore forward, stumbling into motion, boots pounding toward the malformed corridor. Behind me, Adler continued speaking, his voice rising, straining, as if he were forcing the system to argue with itself. I didn't look back. I heard it. A sudden, violent surge of sound and pressure as the custodians lunged. Adler's voice cut off abruptly, not with a scream, with silence. I reached the malformed passage and threw myself into it just as the corridor behind me sealed with a wet, final sound. I collapsed onto the floor, chest heaving, vision swimming. The hum here was different, unstable, oscillating. The walls were uneven, the black surface fractured by jagged seams that leaked faint light like cracks in a shell. I was alone. The realization hit, harder than fear. Everyone else was gone. Patel, Rios, Sato, Hale, the medic, Ochoa, Adler, dead, erased, or something worse. I pushed myself up on shaking arms. "Okay," I whispered to no one. "Okay." The passage sloped upward now, sharply enough that gravity felt heavier with each step. The air grew cooler, drier, closer to real cave air, though the sterile undertone never fully left. As I climbed, the structure around me groaned softly, not in pain, but in recalibration. The system was adjusting to my presence like a body reacting to a splinter. I reached a bend and stopped short. The passage ahead ended in a wall of fractured black material. Except it wasn't solid. It was thin, translucent, and beyond it, I saw something impossible. Stone. Real stone. Layered, cracked, familiar. Sedimentary rock. I pressed my hand against the thin barrier. It felt warm, flexible. A membrane. My heart leapt. The canyon. A tremor ran through the passage. Behind. Me! The hum surged again, angry now, focused. I didn't have time to think. I pulled my geological hammer from my belt, a tool that felt laughably inadequate, and swung. The hammer struck the membrane with a dull, wet impact. It stretched. I swung again. The membrane split with a sound like tearing cloth soaked in oil. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of dust and ancient rock. I tore the opening wider with my hands, ignoring the heat burning my gloves, and then I was through. I tumbled into a narrow crevice, scraping rock, sliding until I hit solid ground hard enough to knock the air from my lungs. I lay there gasping, staring up at rough stone that my headlamp illuminated in familiar shades of brown and red. Real geology, real earth. Behind me, the membrane sealed itself silently, leaving nothing but rock. No seam, No door. No sign that the structure existed at all. I laughed, hysterical, then choked it back as the reality set in. I was alive, alone, and, somewhere beneath me, the system was still awake. The ground vibrated faintly, like a distant engine idling. I pushed myself to my feet and began climbing upward through the crevice, toward whatever counted as daylight in this cursed place. As I climbed, a final sensation brushed the back of my mind. Not a voice, not an image, but a concept pressed gently, deliberately, like a hand reminding me of unfinished business, unresolved contamination. I reached a narrow opening and hauled myself up, emerging into a natural cavern lit faintly by daylight, filtering through cracks above. The Grand Canyon. I slumped against the rock wall, sobbing quietly, hands shaking. I had escaped. But the system hadn't let me go. It had let me out. And there was a difference. I don't remember how long I sat in that cavern listening to my own breathing. Minutes, maybe. Could have been an hour. Time down there didn't behave the way it should, and my sense of it was shredded by shock and grief and the constant vibration I could still feel through the rock. The engine idle sensation. The system wasn't a thing I'd escaped from like a predator you outrun. It was a presence embedded in the planet. A condition. Above me, thin ribbons of daylight filtered through cracks in the stone, painting the cavern walls with pale bands. Dust drifted slowly in those beams, the only motion that felt normal. I checked my gear with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Helmet light still working. Harness damaged where the custodian probe had touched it. Strap bleached and brittle. My radio was dead. My phone had no signal, and even if it did, I couldn't imagine calling anyone and saying, "Hello." I was just hunted by a planetary machine beneath the Grand Canyon, and everyone died. The names came anyway, like a roll call I couldn't stop. Hale, Medic, Ochoa, Sato, Patel, Rios, Adler. I swallowed, throat tight. Adler had been the worst kind of man, but he'd still stepped into the teeth of those things to buy me seconds. I didn't know whether to hate him or thank him. I forced myself upright. The cavern had a narrow exit, an uneven climb toward a fissure where daylight intensified. I followed it, wedging myself through rock that scraped my shoulders, until I emerged onto a ledge that overlooked a dry side canyon. Wind hit my face. Real wind. Cold and dusty, smelling of sun-warmed stone. It should have been relief. Instead, it felt like stepping onto a stage after surviving backstage fire. The canyon looked unchanged, massive, indifferent, beautiful in the way old things can be. Layers of red and tan sandstone stretched for miles, carved by time and water and gravity. But I knew now there was something underneath those layers that didn't belong to time. Something that treated time like a tool. I started moving along the ledge, keeping low, scanning for any sign of the perimeter camp. If I could reach the fences, reach the lights, find a guard, someone, then maybe I could get out before the system decided I was still unresolved. The ledge narrowed, forcing me into a traverse. Loose rock shifted under my boots. I moved slowly, careful. Halfway across, my helmet light flickered once. Just a hiccup, but it made my blood run cold. Because the light had flickered underground before the custodians appeared, like the system's attention caused interference. I stopped, holding my breath, listening. At first, there was only wind. Then faintly, I heard something else. A clicking, not mechanical, not like the archive's data chatter. This was sharper, irregular, like small stones tapping together. I turned my head. On the canyon wall across from my ledge, something moved. For a split second, I thought it was a lizard clinging to rock. Then it shifted again, and I realized it was too smooth, too coordinated, too deliberate. A custodian, on the surface. It clung to the vertical wall with limbs that pressed into stone as if stone were just another floor. Its pale lines glowed faintly even in daylight, visible like phosphorescent veins under dark glass skin. My lungs locked. "No," I whispered. The custodian tilted, facing me. It had no eyes, no head in any human sense, but it oriented perfectly to my position, and I felt that pressure behind my eyes again, like something focusing on me from a distance. The clicking sound came again, closer this time. I looked down the ledge. Another custodian had emerged from a fissure in the rock 20 yards ahead, gliding out like it had been poured. I backed up slowly, heart pounding. The canyon was open, huge, filled with roots and hiding places. But the custodians didn't hunt by sight. They hunted by classification, by signal, by my presence in the system's awareness. I turned and ran the only way I could, back through the fissure I'd climbed out of. I shoved into the crack, scraping rock, forcing my shoulders through. Behind me, the clicking grew louder. Something tapped the stone near the opening, and the rock vibrated like it had been struck with a tuning fork. I dropped into the cavern, landing hard, and scrambled deeper until the light from the fissure dimmed. My helmet light steadied. I leaned against the wall, panting, trying not to scream. The clicking echoed faintly from above. Then it stopped. Silence again. I waited, muscles tense, expecting the custodian to simply slide down the fissure after me. It didn't. Instead, the cavern air shifted. Warmth seeped in from somewhere deeper, the sterile undertone returning. And I realized the surface had not been an escape route. It had been a test. They'd let me out to see what I would do, to see where I would run. I moved deeper into the cavern, following a natural slope that led away from the fissure. I didn't know where it went, only that staying near the opening felt like standing in the doorway of a room with an angry animal behind it. The slope led into a tighter tunnel, natural at first, rough limestone, mineral deposits, drip marks. Then, gradually, the rock texture changed. The walls became smoother, warmer, and pale vein lines began to appear again, faint at first, then clearer. I stopped, bile rising. I had circled back into the system. There was no outside. Not really, not anymore. My breath came in shallow pulls as I stared down the corridor. It wasn't the same corridor as before. This one had more imperfections, more seams. But it was unmistakably part of the structure. And it was open, as if waiting. I stepped forward carefully, boots quiet on the warm surface. The hum returned, low and steady, and a sensation pressed into my mind like a hand on the back of my neck. Guidance. The floor veins lit ahead, forming a path. I followed because the alternative was wandering blind until a custodian found me. The corridor narrowed, then opened into a chamber smaller than the archive, but still impossibly engineered. The ceiling here was low enough that my headlamp could illuminate it fully, revealing a web of pale lines like nerves. At the center of the chamber was something that looked like a pool. Not liquid. A shallow depression filled with that same shimmering haze I'd seen in the processing pit. But calmer, contained. On the far side of the pool, embedded in the wall, was a structure like a console. Flat, pale surface, ring above it. Another interface. The floor veins guided me toward it. I approached slowly, every nerve screaming that touching anything in here was suicide. But my mind kept replaying Adler's last words. Rules. If there were rules, there was leverage. I stood before the console. The pale surface brightened under. My headlamp then brightened on its own, responding to my presence. Symbols formed, then simplified, then, impossibly, resolved into something my brain could interpret. Not English words, but images, a human silhouette, mine, highlighted. Around it, a pattern like a web. Then a single symbol, unresolved. My stomach twisted. Yeah, I got that. The console shifted again. It showed the surface above, an outline of the canyon rim, fences, the camp. Then it showed paths branching outward. Most paths were dim. One path pulsed bright, a route, an exit. But at the end of that route, the image showed something else. A figure. Not me. A human outline marked stable, like Adler's had been, and a symbol beside it that made my skin go cold because it was the same geometry I'd seen in the archive when Patel vanished. Authorized variable. It was waiting at the surface camp. Someone still alive. Someone the system tolerated. I stared at the image until my eyes burned. "Who are you?" I whispered. The console didn't answer with a name. It answered with a new image, a door symbol, then a concept pressed into my mind, clear as a spoken sentence. Return. Complete classification. I stepped back, shaking my head. No, I'm not coming back in. The hum deepened. The pool shimmered, and the haze inside it rose slightly, like something waking. Then the console displayed another image, simple and brutal. A human silhouette, mine, breaking apart into chalky fragments like Sato. A final concept pressed into my mind. Non-compliance results in correction. Fear clawed up my throat. I forced myself to breathe. If I ran, I was hunted. If I stayed, I was processed. Unless I could use the route. Reach the stable human at the camp, get help, get out, expose this. But the system didn't offer routes for my benefit. It offered them for its own. It wanted me to return to the surface in a controlled way. Through a path it monitored. To a person it controlled. A trap dressed as a lifeline. And yet, I didn't have another option. I stared at the console, at the glowing route, at the stable human icon at the end of it. Then I nodded once, more to myself than to the machine. "Fine," I whispered. "I'll go." The hum eased slightly, like approval. The floor veins lit brighter, pointing toward a new corridor opening at the chamber's edge. I turned and started walking. And behind me, the pool shimmered again, rising higher, as if the system was preparing for the moment I failed. The corridor the console opened for me didn't feel like the others. It was too straight, too consistent. No gentle curves meant to disorient, no branching choices. Just a single line of passage that angled upward in long, steady ramps, the floor veins pulsing ahead like runway lights. Guidance, or a leash. I kept my pace measured, saving breath, listening. The hum stayed low and steady, like the system had settled into a monitoring mode. Every so often I felt a faint pressure behind my eyes, a reminder that I was being watched from inside my own skull. Twice I heard the clicking again, faint, distant, but it never approached. I told myself that meant the custodians were behind, keeping distance because they didn't need to chase. They could wait at the end of the route. At some point the air changed. It picked up dryness and dust, a hint of sun-warmed stone. The sterile sweetness thinned, real earth again. The corridor ended at something that looked like a natural fissure, rough rock, uneven edges. But I could see the black sheen beneath the stone, like a skin wearing a disguise. I squeezed through, shoulders scraping, and emerged into open air. Daylight hit my eyes hard enough that I winced. I blinked rapidly, scanning. I was on a narrow shelf beneath the rim, not far from where the perimeter camp had been. I could see it above. Floodlights, tents, vehicles, fencing. The same temporary city. Except it was wrong. Too quiet. No generators humming. No voices. No movement. The floodlights were still on, but they were flickering slightly, like power was unstable. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I climbed carefully toward a service path cut into the rock. My boots crunched on loose gravel, and the sound felt too loud in the silence. As I neared the top, the smell of diesel and hot metal hit me, familiar and comforting in a way that made me want to cry. Then I saw the first body, a guard slumped against the fence line, head tilted at an unnatural angle, rifle still strapped to his chest. His skin looked wrong, not pale from blood loss, greyish, dry. I approached cautiously, swallowing bile. His eyes were open but glazed, and his lips had pulled back slightly from his teeth, as if dehydration had tightened everything. Not shot, not stabbed, corrected. I backed away, heart hammering. The system hadn't just followed me to the surface, it had already come here. I moved through the camp like a ghost, crouching low behind equipment crates and tent poles, scanning for motion. The floodlights cast harsh shadows. A wind moved through the tents, making canvas flap softly. No screams, no gunfire, just aftermath. I found more bodies near the central operations tent. 2 technicians sprawled near a radio array, their equipment crumbled into powder around them. Another soldier lay face down near a generator that had been half dissolved, its casing turned to chalk. The camp had been wiped quietly, efficiently, and yet the console had shown one stable human icon here. Someone alive, someone tolerated. My mouth went dry. I made my way toward the largest tent, the command hub. Its entrance flap hung open. Inside, the light was dimmer, softer. I slipped in. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not rot, not blood. Coffee. Fresh, warm coffee. It hit me so hard my knees nearly buckled. Then a voice spoke from the back of the tent. "Dr. Mason Rourke," it said calmly. "You're late." I spun, hammering breath trapped in my chest. A man sat at a folding table beneath a hanging lamp. Mid-40s, lean build, short-cropped hair, clean-shaven. He wore a field jacket with no insignia and a badge on a lanyard he didn't bother to hide. On the table was a tablet, a paper folder, and a steaming mug. He looked up at me like I was an appointment. And the worst part was his eyes. They weren't afraid, not even a little. "Who are you?" I rasped, voice raw. He sipped his coffee. "You can call me Director Vance." My hand tightened on my geological hammer, ridiculous weapon in a world that erased rifles. "Where is everyone?" Vance set the mug down gently. "Removed." I stared. "Removed by what?" He met my gaze without blinking. "By the same thing that removed your team." My stomach churned. "You knew." Vance didn't deny it. "I knew the risk profile." I took a step forward. "Risk profile. They died. Patel vanished in my arms. Rios turned into—" "I've seen the effects," Vance interrupted, still calm. "You're alive. That's what matters." "Why?" The word came out broken. "Why am I alive?" Vance tapped the tablet with one finger. "Because you're useful." A faint pressure pressed behind my eyes, and I realized something sickening. It wasn't just the system watching, it was him. He understood the system's attention like a person understands a leash tugging. "You're the stable, variable," I said. My throat tightened. "The icon." Vance smiled faintly. "Yes. What did you do to become tolerated?" Vance leaned back slightly. I listened. That answer made my skin crawl more than any monster. "What does it want from me?" I asked. Vance's smile faded. "Completion." He slid the folder across the table toward me, the same way Adler's people had slid folders, like contamination. "Read," he said. I didn't touch it. "No." Vance sighed, as if disappointed. "Mason, you can refuse, you can run, but you already saw custodians on the rock face. You already felt the system shepherd you. You think the canyon is big enough to hide in. The system isn't confined to caverns, it's threaded through the earth." I swallowed, throat burning. "Then why are you sitting here drinking coffee like this is normal?" Vance's eyes held mine. "Because panic is unproductive." I hated him in that moment with a clarity that steadied me. "What is this place?" I asked. "What is it really?" Vance folded his hands. "It's old, older than anything we can date. It's not a ship, it's not a base, it's an infrastructure." My jaw clenched. "For what?" He looked at the tent wall as if he could see through it into the canyon beyond. "For keeping worlds within tolerable parameters." I remembered the archive. Failed worlds, corrections, preserved bodies. My stomach turned. It's a planetary governor, I whispered. Vance nodded. A maintenance lattice. A corrective network. Choose your term. And it's waking up, I said. Yes, Vance agreed. It has been asleep, or operating at minimal intensity, but something changed. Us, I said bitterly. Vance's gaze sharpened. Not just you. Not just the drilling. He tapped the tablet again, and the screen lit with a simple graph. Seismic data, but not like Patel's. This was global, spiking in, subtle patterns that matched no natural fault behavior. My geophysicist brain recognized the signature of coordinated resonance. It's responding to something external, Vance said quietly. I stared. External? Like what? Vance hesitated for the first time. Just a flicker. Then he said it. Like a signal. The word made my skin prickle. A signal from where? I asked. Vance's face was unreadable. We don't know yet, but the system does. My mouth went dry. And what does it want me to do? Vance slid the folder again, closer. It wants you to go back down. I barked a laugh that sounded close to a sob. Absolutely not. Vance's voice stayed calm, but it hardened slightly. Mason, if you don't, it will correct you. I can leave, I snapped. I can hike out, find a road. You can try, Vance said. But you saw what it did to the camp. You think it can't reach beyond this perimeter. You think the lattice stops at the canyon's edge? He leaned forward. It wants classification completed, he said. And it wants it done through you. I felt cold spread through my chest. Through me how? Vance pointed at my head. It tagged you, he said. The archive couldn't resolve you. You're noisy, resistant. Your brain pattern is incompatible with its prediction models. That's why it didn't just erase you like Patel. It needs you to come closer so it can decide what to do with the anomaly you represent. My hands shook. So I'm bait. Vance nodded. Yes. I stared at him, fury and terror twisting together. And you're okay with that? Vance took a slow breath. If it completes classification on you, we learn how it thinks, how it decides, how to negotiate. Negotiate, I repeated, voice hollow. With a machine that turns people into dust. Vance's expression didn't change. With a system that governs worlds. Yes, I backed toward the tent entrance, scanning the camp beyond. I'm not going back down there. Vance's voice followed me, calm and certain. You will. I stopped. Why are you so sure? Vance lifted his mug again. Because it already decided. The floodlights outside flickered harder, strobing. A low hum rose through the ground beneath the tent, subtle but unmistakable, like something massive shifting deep below. I felt pressure behind my eyes again, stronger now, like a hand closing around my skull. Vance didn't react. He just watched me with steady eyes. Then, in the doorway behind me, a shadow moved. I turned slowly. A custodian stood at the tent entrance, perfectly still, pale lines glowing faintly in the dim light. Its slit seam opened and closed like breathing. It had come inside. The surface wasn't safe. Vance's voice was quiet, almost gentle. Welcome to the negotiation, Dr. Rourke. The custodian in the doorway didn't rush. It didn't threaten. It simply occupied space like the concept of inevitability had taken a physical form. My body wanted to bolt. My muscles tensed for it. But my brain remembered what running looked like in this place, how panic turned people into debris and dust and absence. I held still, hammer clenched in my right hand, eyes fixed on the featureless black surface and the pale lines that glowed beneath it like veins under skin. Vance didn't stand. He didn't reach for a weapon. He sipped his coffee again, slow enough to be insulting. You see? He said quietly. It's listening. My voice came out thin. It's in the tent. That's new, Vance said, as if noting a weather change. Before, they didn't breach fabric structures. They stayed to rock. Now it's comfortable crossing into human space. The custodian's slit seam opened and closed. I felt the pressure behind my eyes increase until my vision blurred at the edges. A thought that wasn't mine pressed into my head, clean and foreign, like a concept inserted rather than spoken. Approach. I staggered back a half step, teeth clenched. Vance watched me with mild interest. "It's addressing you, not me." "Why?" I whispered. Vance shrugged. "You're unresolved. It wants to resolve you." The custodian glided forward one measured step, limbs placing themselves with perfect quiet. The canvas floor didn't even creak. It moved like the tent was part of the system now. I raised the hammer slightly, not as a threat, but because my body needed to hold something. Vance leaned forward, voice calm. "Don't." "Like bullets mattered," I muttered. "That's not why," Vance said. "It's not here to be harmed. It's here to deliver terms." The word terms made my stomach twist. The custodian stopped 3 feet from me. The pale lines along its body brightened, branching and pulsing in patterns that made my eyes want to unfocus. The slit seam widened. The probe extended. I flinched, but forced myself not to step back. The thing didn't move like an animal, but I had learned the hard way that it responded to motion as input. The probe hovered at my forehead, a breath away. Then it touched the front of my helmet. Not my skin, not my flesh. The helmet's surface whitened in a circular patch, fibers stiffening as if aging decades in a second. The probe retracted, and something happened inside my head. The world stuttered. For a fraction of a second, the tent disappeared. I saw black walls, pale lines, the archive's columns, Patel's hand gripping my sleeve, Rios shouting, Adler's pale eyes. Then those images peeled away and were replaced by something else, an internal view, like my brain had been laid open and scanned. Not pain, not exactly. It was like being understood without consent. I dropped to one knee, gasping. Vance's voice stayed level. "It's sampling." I clenched my teeth, forcing my eyes up to the custodian. It was motionless again, as if it had completed a simple task. Then the pressure behind my eyes shifted into something clearer. Structured thought, arranged not as words, but as meaning. Classification attempt. Mismatch detected. Escalation required. Vance set his mug down and finally stood. He moved slowly, careful, like a man approaching a wild animal he believed he'd trained. "Mason," he said softly. "Don't fight it. Let it run the sequence." "I'm not letting it do anything," I snarled. Vance's gaze sharpened. "You don't have the leverage you think you do." I rose unsteadily, keeping the hammer raised. "You said negotiation." Vance nodded once. "Yes, but negotiation requires both parties to have something the other wants." I laughed bitterly. "And what does it want? My brain?" Vance's eyes held mine. "It wants an answer. You're an anomaly in its model. It can't just erase you because you represent uncertainty. And uncertainty spreads." My mouth went dry. Vance continued. "If it resolves you, it resolves the anomaly. If it fails, it expands correction scope." The words hit me like cold water. "Scope," I whispered. Vance nodded. "Earth." Outside the tent, the floodlights flickered again, stronger. I heard metal clink somewhere in the camp, followed by a faint crackling sound. I looked out through the open flap. The fence line was vibrating, not from wind, from something moving beneath the ground. A seam opened in the dirt near the generator pad. Black sheen rose like liquid, forming an oval patch that looked wrong against the sand and gravel. A surface door. The system was opening another access point. My lungs tightened. It wasn't just hunting me anymore. It was repositioning. Vance followed my gaze and nodded slightly, as if satisfied. "It's offering an exchange." The custodian's pale lines pulsed again, and the pressure behind my eyes returned, heavier. A concept formed, blunt and clear, Return. Complete classification at primary interface. In exchange, localized correction ceases. I stared at Vance. It'll stop killing people if I go down. Vance's face didn't show pity. It showed calculation. That's the offer. And if I refuse? Vance didn't answer. The ground answered. A distant, soft crack echoed from outside, like stone fracturing. Then another. One of the floodlight poles leaned slightly, its base crumbling into pale powder. Correction spreading. I swallowed hard. You're not negotiating. You're translating threats. Vance's eyes stayed steady. I'm ensuring we survive long enough to understand. I looked at the custodian again. It waited. It didn't hurry. A machine never hurries when time belongs to it. What's the primary interface? I asked. Vance exhaled, relieved I'd asked the right question. The core you almost reached. The correction engine. There's a deeper terminal, older than the archive, closer to the lattice's command structure. And Adler knew about it, I said. Vance's jaw tightened. Adler was a courier, a partial access asset, not as stable as me. I stared. So you sent him down to open the door, then you sent us to… what? Feed it? Vance didn't deny it. He simply said, you weren't supposed to survive as an unresolved variable. The words made my hands shake again. You planned this. Vance met my gaze. I planned for the best case outcome. What's best case? I snapped. Vance's expression was the closest thing to honesty I'd seen from him. That we learn how to speak to it before it decides humanity is an incompatible organism. The camp outside groaned softly as more seams opened in the ground, black patches forming in a slow spreading pattern. The system wasn't just opening one door. It was creating multiple, like pores, like vents, a network rising. I looked at the custodian. If I go down, it might stop this? Vance nodded. For now, while it processes. And you're coming with me, I said. Vance hesitated, just a fraction, then shook his head. No. Rage flared again. You said negotiation. I said you're the offering, Vance replied calmly. If I go, I risk destabilizing my tolerated status. I can't afford that. I stepped toward him, hammer raised. You want to send me into that thing alone? Vance's gaze didn't move. Not alone. He gestured subtly toward the tent wall behind him. A second custodian stood there, half-shadowed, as if it had been present the entire time, and my mind had refused to register it. My stomach turned. Vance's voice softened. They'll escort you. Escort, I repeated, shaking. Like they escorted hail. Vance didn't flinch. Like they escorted an unresolved sample to a controlled interface. The custodian nearest me extended its probe again, not touching this time, just pointing toward the camp's edge, where the black oval door in the ground had fully opened. Warm air rose from it, sterile and sweet. A stairway formed within, smooth black steps descending into darkness. I felt the pressure behind my eyes tighten into a single directive. Proceed. I looked out at the camp, floodlights flickering, poles crumbling, dirt seams opening like wounds. If I ran, it would follow. It had already shown me custodians crawling on rock faces in daylight. The canyon was not a barrier. If I fought, I would become debris. If I complied, maybe it would stop expanding. Maybe it would contain the correction to me. Vance watched my face, reading decision. You understand now. I swallowed and forced the words out. If I go down and it processes me, what happens? Vance's eyes held mine. That depends on whether you become compatible. My mouth went dry. And if I don't? Vance's voice was quiet. Then the lattice learns a new lesson. He didn't have to explain the rest. I turned toward the open ground door, toward the warm breath rising from it. The custodian glided aside, giving me a clear path, like a host offering the way to the slaughterhouse. As I stepped out of the tent, a final thought pressed into my mind, not from the system, but from myself. This was never about finding the oldest UFO on Earth. This was about discovering that Earth had never belonged to us in the first place. I began to descend the black stairs. The stairs didn't feel like stairs for long. At first, they were distinct steps, smooth black surfaces that absorbed my headlamp beam and returned only a faint sheen. The air rising from below carried that sterile sweetness again, thick enough to coat the back of my throat. Each breath felt like inhaling the inside of a sealed machine. 2 custodians flanked me, gliding rather than walking. They didn't touch me. They didn't need to. Their presence alone was constraint, a silent reminder that choice had become a theatrical word. Behind me, the daylight at the camp entrance narrowed until it was a pale coin in darkness. Then the passage shifted. The steps blurred into a continuous ramp, and my sense of distance began to slip. The hum rose in my bones, resonating with each footfall. The walls were no longer simple black surfaces with pale veins. Here, the veins were thicker, braided, layered like nerve bundles. I was moving deeper into the part of the system that didn't care about visitors. I was moving towards something that cared only about outcomes. The ramp ended abruptly at a threshold, a seam in the wall, faintly lighter than the rest, like a scar that hadn't fully healed. The custodian nearest me extended its probe toward the seam, not touching it, just aligning. The seam opened, not outward, but inward, as if the material unzipped itself and folded away. Warm air rolled out, heavier than everything I'd felt so far. It carried a metallic undertone like old pennies and damp stone. The chamber beyond swallowed my headlamp beam. I stepped in anyway. The custodians followed, and the seam closed behind us. The click of its closure wasn't audible. It was felt, like pressure sealing. The space inside was vast, but unlike the archive or the workshop, it wasn't made to impress with scale. It felt intimate, purpose-built, like the inside of a skull. The floor was a shallow basin, smooth and dark, with pale lines converging toward a central dais. Above that dais hung a ring like the archives, but larger, thicker, rotating slowly. Around the ring, smaller structures floated, spindle shapes, blocks, irregular pieces that held themselves in the air as if gravity had been negotiated away. At the center of the dais was a vertical slab of pale material, a terminal. Its surface was blank, waiting. The hum deepened, and for a moment I thought of Vance sitting in that tent sipping coffee while the camp died around him. I thought of his calm voice saying compatibility, like it was just a metric. I wanted him here with me. I wanted him to have to stand where I stood. But the system didn't punish the people who deserved it. It punished the people who were available. The pale slab brightened. Symbols formed, cascading down in the geometric language I'd seen before. Then they simplified. Then, with sickening patience, they reshaped into iconography my human brain could interpret. A silhouette, mine, highlighted. Below it, a branching diagram like a decision tree. 2 outcomes pulsed faintly. One was stable, one was not. A pressure tightened behind my eyes until my vision blurred. It wasn't pain, not exactly. It was the sensation of being pulled toward a thought you didn't want to think. A concept formed, sharp and undeniable. Submit. I swallowed hard and forced words out, even though I knew the system didn't need my voice. "I'm here," I whispered. "You wanted me here." The custodians behind me remained still. Their pale lines pulsed faintly in sync with the terminal. The terminal's surface rippled. A new image formed, Earth wrapped in lattice. The Grand Canyon highlighted, the camp above marked as a node. The node flickered, then stabilized slightly, as if my presence here eased the system's expansion. Vance had been right about one thing. It was tied to me. The terminal shifted again. The image zoomed down through Earth's crust, layers peeling away as if depth were just another slider. I saw the network beneath the canyon, the workshop chamber, the archive rows, the corridors. Then I saw something I hadn't seen before. A deeper structure, a central knot in the lattice, like a heart. Not under the canyon, under the planet. A global core. And from that core, thin threads extended outward, not just within Earth, but beyond, into space. I felt my mouth go dry. You're communicating. The concept pressed into my mind like an answer. Listening. The terminal displayed a series of pulses, rhythmic spikes that weren't seismic, weren't electromagnetic in any spectrum I knew. They were pattern, pure and abstract. A signal, the same one Vance had mentioned, except seeing it here made it worse. It wasn't recent. It wasn't new. It had been present in the system for a long time, buried like a dormant instruction. And now it was active. The hum in the chamber rose slightly, like the system was leaning closer. The terminal shifted to show a symbol, one I hadn't seen in the archive. It was sharper, more complex, like multiple geometric languages stacked together. Danger. Not danger like a warning sign. Danger like a rival. Then the terminal showed an image that made my blood turn to ice. The custodians. Not just the two behind me. Thousands, maybe millions, distributed through the lattice like immune cells. And around them, another set of shapes. Darker, less defined, like shadows where geometry refused to settle. Entities that weren't part of the system. Intruders. The terminal pulsed, and a concept landed in my mind with the weight of certainty. Hostile external contact. So that was the enemy. Not the system itself. The system was the planet's immune response. And something out there, something that had woken it, was an infection it recognized. My knees weakened. You're waking up because something is coming. The terminal's surface brightened sharply. A memory played. Not mine, not human. A flash of sky, stars arranged wrong. A planet's horizon, a lattice wrapping it. Then a dark shape descending. Not a ship, not a meteor, a geometry of absence. The lattice flared in response, sending custodians swarming. The dark shape touched the surface and the land beneath it turned grey, brittle, corrected by something else, something more aggressive than this system. The lattice fought. It lost. The image ended with a planet turning silent, its lattice dimming, its biosphere collapsing into stillness. A failed world. The archive hadn't just stored failures from trial and error. It stored casualties from war. My throat tightened until swallowing hurt. You're defending Earth. The concept pressed into my mind. Maintain parameters. Prevent takeover. Eliminate incompatible variables. I flinched at that last part, because it meant the system wasn't just defending the planet from something external. It was also removing anything internal that threatened stability, humans included. The terminal's decision tree brightened. My silhouette appeared again, and now the branches were clearer. One branch showed my silhouette overlaid with pale lattice lines, integrated. The other showed my silhouette breaking apart into fragments, recycled. I understood then what classification really meant. It wasn't just figuring out what I was. It was deciding whether I could be used. As a tool. As a bridge. As a compatible interface between human unpredictability and machine certainty. Or whether I was just waste. The pressure behind my eyes intensified, and suddenly the chamber changed. The ring above the dais spun faster. The floating spindles repositioned, aligning around me, pale light threaded between them like a net. My body stiffened, not from fear, though fear was there, overwhelming. From the sensation of invisible constraints locking around my limbs. I tried to move my arm. It didn't move. The custodians behind me didn't approach. They didn't need to. The chamber itself held me. The terminal brightened, and a sensation surged into my mind. Data, images, concepts, so fast it felt like drowning. I saw Patel vanish again. I saw Rios crack into dust. I saw Sato's statue fracture. I saw Hale yanked into darkness. The system was showing me consequence. Then it showed me something else. Me. Not as I was, but as I could be. Silhouette threaded with lattice, eyes replaced by pale lines, mouth sealed, body walking through corridors without fear, without resistance. A human-shaped custodian, a compatible variable. I tried to scream, but my throat wouldn't obey. The terminal pulsed, and a final concept pressed into me with horrifying clarity. Consent irrelevant, integration optimal. The light net tightened, and then, abruptly, it loosened. I collapsed forward onto my hands and knees, gasping like I'd been held underwater. The chamber's hum settled. The terminal dimmed slightly, as if the system had reached a preliminary decision. My limbs shook violently as control returned. I clutched my head, trying to hold my thoughts inside my skull. The custodians behind me remained still. They weren't waiting for me to run. They were waiting for me to understand my new status. The terminal displayed my silhouette again. This time, it wasn't marked unresolved. It was marked with the stable symbol, tolerated. Not because I deserved it, because I had been altered in some subtle, invisible way. I felt it in my breathing, in the way the hum now seemed less intrusive and more synchronized with my heartbeat. Like the system had threaded itself through me just enough to monitor, just enough to control. A new path lit on the terminal, upward, toward the surface, and a final concept pressed into my mind, unmistakable. Return. Act as interface. Observe external signal. Report. I laughed, a broken sound that turned into a sob. You want me to be your messenger? The custodian nearest me tilted slightly, as if acknowledging. It wasn't agreement. It was assignment. I stood slowly, legs unsteady, mind racing with the image of that external hostile geometry descending on other worlds like a disease. If it was coming here, then Earth wasn't just a planet with an ancient buried system. It was a battlefield. And I had just been drafted by the thing beneath my feet. The seam behind me opened again. The corridor back to the surface waited. I took one step toward it, then stopped, shaking. Because I understood the cruelest part. Vance would never need to go down. He would sit at the rim and drink coffee and call this progress. And I would be the one walking the line between humanity and a planetary machine that had decided I was useful enough not to kill. Yet, I walked into the corridor, because if something hostile was coming, and the system was waking to fight it, then the deaths of my team were not the end of the story. They were the opening move. And whatever happens next, I'm the only one left alive to tell you that the Grand Canyon was never just a canyon. It was a lid, and we opened it. They tell the public the collapse was geological, an unstable formation, a rare failure of rock integrity. The Grand Canyon absorbs another secret the way it absorbs rain, slowly, without complaint. The camp is gone now, filled in, scrubbed clean. No fences, no tents, no chalky remains where people once stood and breathed and thought they were in control. Director Vance still drinks his coffee at the rim sometimes. I can feel when he's there. The system notices him the way it notices a tolerated itch. I don't go near the canyon anymore. I don't have to. I feel it wherever I am. Sometimes it's just a hum under my thoughts, faint enough that I can pretend it's stress or memory. Other times it sharpens, aligning with my heartbeat, and I know the lattice is listening through me, checking parameters, watching the sky for patterns I don't yet understand. I dream of Patel disappearing, of Rios breaking apart, of Adler standing still as the custodians close in. But I also dream of things that aren't mine. Dark geometries drifting between stars, worlds going quiet, lattices failing. Those dreams aren't warnings. They're briefings. I am not controlled. That's what they tell me. That's what I tell myself. But when the pressure behind my eyes tightens and a direction forms in my mind like instinct, I follow it without asking why. Because somewhere out there, something hostile is moving closer, and something beneath our feet has decided I'm useful. The Grand Canyon was never a wound carved by a river. It was a seal. And now that it's been broken, the Earth has started preparing for impact. If this recording reaches you, understand one thing. We did not find the oldest UFO on Earth. It found us, and it's getting ready to defend its world.